You never think it'll be the last normal morning of your life. You never wake up and say, "Today's the day everything falls apart." But that's exactly what happened to me on a rainy Tuesday in Portland. I just didn't know it yet. If you're new here, please hit subscribe and join our community of survivors and supporters. Your story matters, and together, we're stronger. The rain was tapping against our kitchen window, a gentle rhythm that usually brought me comfort. But that morning, it felt more like a warning, a steady drumbeat counting down to something I couldn't yet see. I stood at our pristine granite counter, the one Daniel had insisted on installing last spring, methodically preparing his favorite breakfast: 2 eggs over medium, sourdough toast, and Earl Grey tea with exactly 1 teaspoon of honey. Our Lake Oswego home was quiet, almost too quiet, the kind of quiet that feels like holding your breath. Upstairs, I could hear Daniel getting ready for work, his footsteps heavy against the hardwood floors. Each step made me flinch slightly, though I tried to hide it even from myself. The tea kettle began to whistle, and I quickly lifted it off the burner. Daniel hated loud noises in the morning. Well, he hated them any time, but especially in the morning. I poured the hot water over the tea bag, watching the dark liquid swirl and spread. The honey went in next, 1 perfect teaspoon, just the way he liked it. Everything had to be just the way he liked it. I checked my phone discreetly. 3 missed calls from Jennifer, his sister. My stomach clenched. Nothing good ever came from Jenny's calls, especially not 3 of them before 8 a.m. I quickly slipped the phone back into my robe pocket as Daniel's footsteps reached the bottom of the stairs. "Morning," he said, his voice carefully neutral. That was another warning sign I should have heeded. Daniel was never neutral about anything. "Good morning," I replied, sliding his breakfast plate and tea across the counter. "Did you sleep well?" He ignored my question, picking up his phone instead. "Jenny tried calling you." My hands trembled slightly as I poured my own tea. "Oh? I haven't checked my phone yet this morning." The lie felt bitter on my tongue, but it was the kind of small deception I'd learned to employ for peace, for survival. "She needs to borrow your credit card," Daniel said, not looking up from his phone. "For her new business venture." Of course she did. Jenny always needed something. In the 5 years I'd been married to Daniel, his sister had started 6 different businesses. Each one had ended the same way, with maxed-out credit cards and tearful promises to pay everyone back. The last time, she'd nearly drained our savings account. "I don't think that's a good idea," I said softly, focusing on stirring my tea. After last time? After last time what?" Daniel's voice took on that dangerous edge I knew too well. "Are you saying my sister isn't trustworthy?" I gripped my mug tighter, watching the steam rise in delicate swirls. "No, of course not. It's just, we agreed after the yoga studio incident that we needed to be more careful with our finances." Daniel set his phone down with deliberate slowness. "No, Becky, you agreed. I never said my sister couldn't count on us when she needs help. I thought about the credit card in my wallet, the only one that was still just in my name. The one I'd been secretly using to build up an emergency fund, putting aside small amounts each month where Daniel wouldn't notice. The one thing I still had that was truly mine." "She's family," Daniel continued, his voice rising slightly. "Family helps family. Or did your parents not teach you that before they—" "Don't," I whispered, my voice cracking. "Please don't bring them into this." He stood up, pushing his barely touched breakfast aside. "Jenny's coming over for lunch today. We'll sort this out then." My heart started racing. "I have plans for lunch. I'm meeting Olivia at—" "Cancel them. But cancel them." Each word was clipped, final. "Jenny needs us. She's family. That's more important than whatever gossip session you have planned with that cafe owner." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Daniel walked over to me, placing his hand on my shoulder. To anyone else, it might have looked like an affectionate gesture. I knew better. "You'll give Jenny your card," he said softly. "And you'll be nice about it. Won't you, Becky?" I forced myself to nod again, fighting back tears. "Good girl." He squeezed my shoulder hard enough to make me wince. "I have a showing at 9. I'll be back with Jenny around noon. Have lunch ready." After he left, I stood in the kitchen for a long time, listening to the rain. My tea had gone cold, untouched. I picked up my phone and opened my messages to Olivia. "Need to cancel lunch," I typed. "Family emergency." Olivia's response came quickly. "Everything okay?" I stared at those 2 words, feeling their weight. Was anything okay? Had it been okay for a long time? My finger hovered over the keyboard as I thought about all the lunches I'd canceled, all the times I'd made excuses, all the moments I'd chosen. Daniel's version of peace over my own happiness. "Just Jenny stuff," I replied finally. "Rain check?" "Always here if you need me," Olivia wrote back. "Anytime, day or night. You know that, right?" I did know that. I just wasn't sure I deserved it anymore. Looking at the clock, I realized I had 4 hours until Daniel returned with Jenny. 4 hours to decide. Would I give up my last piece of financial independence to keep the peace? Or would I finally stand my ground? The rain kept falling, and, somewhere in the distance, thunder rumbled. A storm was coming, both outside and in. I just didn't know yet how bad it would be. The next 4 hours felt like walking through molasses. Every minute dragged as I tried to keep myself busy, to keep my mind from spinning out of control. I cleaned our already spotless kitchen, wiped down the granite countertops until I could see my reflection in them, and started preparing lunch. Daniel's favorite chicken piccata with roasted vegetables. My hands moved automatically through the familiar motions while my thoughts raced. I couldn't stop thinking about Jenny's previous business ventures. There was the yoga studio that never opened, the organic skincare line that consisted of nothing more than a fancy Instagram account, the life coaching certification she never completed, the jewelry-making business that produced exactly 3 necklaces, the meal prep service that ended in food poisoning, and most recently, the fashion blog that lasted exactly 2 weeks. Each failure had cost me, thousands of dollars. The chicken was sizzling in the pan when my phone buzzed. Another message from Jenny. "Can't wait to tell you about my new project. You're going to love it. This one's different. I promise." I set the phone down without responding, my hands shaking slightly as I added capers to the sauce. Different. That's what she always said. That's what Daniel always believed. Or pretended to believe. Sometimes I wondered if he actually cared about Jenny's businesses at all, or if this was just another way to keep me under his control. The sound of rain against the windows grew stronger, matching the storm building inside my chest. I thought about my credit card, safely tucked away in my wallet, the only thing that was truly mine anymore. I thought about the careful balance I maintained on it, never using it for anything suspicious, making small purchases here and there at the grocery store or gas station, slowly building up cashback rewards that I converted to statement credit. 3 years of careful planning had given me a small emergency fund, hidden in plain sight. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Olivia. "Just checking in. The cafe's quiet today if you want to talk." I stared at her message, remembering when we first met 2 years ago. I'd wandered into the Copper Cup Cafe on a rare afternoon, alone, drawn by the smell of fresh coffee and the warm, inviting atmosphere. Olivia had been behind the counter, her curly hair escaping from its messy bun, her smile genuine and warm. We'd clicked immediately, bonding over our shared love of mystery novels and Earl Grey tea. Daniel hadn't liked it. He never said so directly, but I saw how his jaw tightened whenever I mentioned her name, how he always had some reason why I couldn't meet her for lunch or coffee. "She's just using you to network," he'd say. "She probably just wants free publicity for her cafe." But Olivia had never asked me for anything except my friendship. The timer on the oven beeped, startling me from my thoughts. as I pulled out the roasted vegetables, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the window. When had I started looking so tired? So afraid? The woman staring back at me barely resembled the elementary school teacher I'd been when I first met Daniel. That woman had been confident, independent, loved by her students and respected by their parents. That woman had dreams of her own. I plated the food carefully, arranging everything just the way Daniel liked it. The perfectionism he'd instilled in me over the years had become second nature. Even now, knowing what was coming, I couldn't help but make sure every detail was perfect. The table was set with our best plates, the ones we'd received as wedding gifts. Crystal glasses sparkled in the dim light filtering through the rain-streaked windows. Everything looked beautiful, peaceful even, like a scene from a magazine about perfect homes and perfect lives. The clock on the wall showed 11:45. They'd be here soon. My stomach churned as I remembered the last time Jenny had asked for money. I'd tried to refuse then too, pointing out that we were saving for a down payment on a new house.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
Daniel hadn't thrown anything that time, but the bruises on my arms had taken weeks to fade. I found myself walking to our bedroom, drawn to the small jewelry box on my dresser. Inside, beneath tangles of necklaces I never wore anymore, was a small photo. My parents on their last vacation, smiling at the camera from a beach somewhere in Florida. The accident had happened 2 weeks after this photo was taken. Sometimes I wondered if they would recognize me now, if they would be proud of the woman I'd become, or if they would be disappointed in how much I'd let Daniel change me. The sound of a car door slamming jerked me back to the present. Through the bedroom window, I could see Daniel's black BMW in the driveway. Jenny's red Volkswagen pulled in behind it, the one she'd bought with money borrowed from their parents. My heart started racing as I watched them walk toward the house, huddled under a shared umbrella. Jenny was talking animatedly, her free hand gesturing wildly while Daniel nodded along. I hurried back to the kitchen, checking my reflection one last time in the microwave door. My long brown hair was neatly styled, my makeup carefully applied to cover the dark circles under my eyes. I'd chosen my outfit deliberately that morning. A soft blue sweater that Daniel had once complimented, dark jeans that made me feel put together, armor in its own way. The front door opened, bringing with it a gust of cold air and the sound of Jenny's laughter. "Becky!" Daniel's voice called out. "We're home!" Home. When had this house stopped feeling like home? When had it become a battlefield where I constantly fought to keep the peace? "In the kitchen," I called back, proud of how steady my voice sounded. "Lunch is ready." They appeared in the doorway, Jenny shaking water from her umbrella while Daniel hung up his coat. My sister-in-law's face lit up when she saw the spread on the table. "Oh my God, it smells amazing in here. Daniel, you're so lucky to have such a domestic goddess for a wife." The compliment felt like an insult, though I knew Jenny didn't mean it that way. Or maybe she did. With Jenny, it was always hard to tell what was genuine and what was manipulation. "Sit, sit." I gestured to the table, falling into the role of perfect hostess. "Everything's ready." We settled around the table, Daniel at the head, Jenny and I on either side, like a parody of a normal family lunch. I served them both, making sure Daniel's portion was exactly the way he liked it. "So," Jenny began, barely waiting for her plate to be set down, "I have the most exciting news. You know how I've always been interested in wellness and helping people live their best lives?" I nodded automatically, though I couldn't remember Jenny ever mentioning anything about wellness before last week. "Well, I've found this amazing opportunity. It's a new supplement company, totally revolutionary. They're looking for wellness coaches to help spread the message. The initial investment is a bit steep, but the potential returns are incredible." My heart sank. Multi-level marketing. Of course. I glanced at Daniel, but his face was unreadable as he cut into his chicken. "The starter kit is only $15,000, Jenny continued enthusiastically. "And that includes all the products, training materials, and your own personal website." The amount hit me like a physical blow. $15,000. More than she'd ever asked for before. More than my credit card's limit could even handle. "Jenny," I began carefully, "that sounds interesting, but I knew you'd love it," she interrupted. "And the best part is, you could join too. We could be business partners." I set my fork down, my appetite completely gone. "Actually, I don't think—" "Becky." Daniel's voice was quiet but sharp. A warning. "Let your sister finish." I fell silent, watching as Jenny pulled out a glossy brochure from her oversized purse. The same purse, I noticed, that she'd bought with money borrowed from their mother last Christmas. Money she'd promised to pay back but never had. "Look at these testimonials." She spread the brochure across the table, right over our carefully plated lunch. "People are making 6 figures in their first year, and with your credit card, I could get started right away. I already have my first 5 customers lined up." Thunder rumbled outside, closer now. The storm was almost here. I stared at the brochure spread across our lunch table, my mouth dry as Jenny continued her enthusiastic pitch. The glossy photos showed smiling women in yoga pants, holding green, smoothies and walking on beaches, their perfect lives supposedly made possible by selling overpriced supplements to their friends and family. "The company is called Vitality Plus," Jenny was saying, her eyes bright with excitement. "It's not just supplements, it's a whole lifestyle, brand, and the best part is, once you build your downline, you barely have to work at all." Lightning flashed outside, illuminating the kitchen for a brief moment. In that flash, I caught Daniel's expression, the hardness in his eyes, the slight downturn of his mouth. I knew that look. It was the same look he'd given me before every major fight we'd had in our marriage. "Jenny," I said, trying to keep my voice gentle but firm, "I appreciate you thinking of me, but I can't help with this. My credit card won't even cover that amount." "Oh, that's no problem." Jenny reached into her purse again, pulling out more papers. "They have a special financing option. You can split it between multiple cards. I thought maybe we could use yours for the initial deposit, and then—" "No." The word came out stronger than I intended, surprising even me. The kitchen went silent. Even the rain seemed to pause for a moment. Jenny's smile faltered, and Daniel set down his fork with deliberate slowness. "What did you say?" he asked, his voice dangerously quiet. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to meet his gaze. I said no. I'm not giving Jenny my credit card. Not for this, not for anything else. Jenny's lower lip started to tremble, a move I'd seen her perfect over years of getting her way. But I thought you supported me. You're my sister." "Sister-in-law," I corrected, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. "And I do support you, Jenny, but not like this. Not anymore. The yoga studio, the skincare line, the jewelry business, they all ended the same way, with maxed-out credit cards and broken promises. Becky," Daniel's voice was like ice, "apologize to your sister. Now." I gripped my napkin under the table, my knuckles turning white. "No, Daniel, I won't apologize for telling the truth. This has to stop." Daniel stood up slowly, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. The sound made me flinch, but I forced myself to stay seated, to keep my spine straight. "Jenny," he said, not taking his eyes off me, "why don't you go wait in the living room? I need to have a private conversation with my wife." Jenny gathered her brochures quickly, shooting me a hurt look as she left the kitchen. As soon as she was gone, Daniel walked to the counter where our cups of tea sat waiting. We'd barely touched our food, but he'd made sure to have fresh tea prepared for Jenny's visit. Always the perfect host. "What do you think you're doing?" he asked, picking up his cup. "I'm protecting our financial future," I replied, proud that my voice didn't shake. "We can't keep enabling Jenny's schemes. We've already lost thousands." "Our financial future?" He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Last I checked, I'm the one who pays the mortgage. I'm the one who bought you this beautiful house, who gives you everything you want. And you can't do this one thing for my sister?" "That's not fair," I said, standing up to face him. "I work too. I contribute to this household, and that credit card is in my name. Mine." His eyes narrowed. "Everything you have is because of me. Or have you forgotten how I took you in after your parents died? How I gave you a home when you had nothing?" The mention of my parents sent a spike of anger through me. "You didn't take me in, Daniel. We were already dating when they died. And I wasn't nothing. I had my teaching career, my own apartment, my own life." "A life you were failing at," his voice rose. "Teaching finger painting to snot-nosed brats for barely enough money to pay rent? I gave you a real life?" "No," I said, my voice growing stronger with each word. "You didn't give me a life. You took mine away, piece by piece, decision by decision, until there was nothing left but what you wanted me to be." The flash of rage in his eyes should have warned me, but I was too caught up in finally speaking my truth. "I'm not giving Jenny my credit card," I continued. "Not today, not ever. And if you can't respect that, then maybe we need to—" I never got to finish that sentence. In one fluid motion, Daniel flung his cup of hot tea directly at my face. Time seemed to slow down as I watched the amber liquid arc through the air. Then pain, searing, immediate pain as the scalding tea hit my skin. I screamed, stumbling backward. My hip hit the corner of the counter as I raised my hands to my face. Through my fingers, I could see Daniel standing there, the empty cup still in his hand, his face a mask of cold fury. Jenny appeared in the doorway, her eyes wide. "Oh my God! Becky, are you okay?" The tea had soaked through my blue sweater, the fabric clinging to my burning skin. My face felt like it was on fire, and I could feel the heat spreading down my neck and chest. "Look what you made me do," Daniel said, his voice eerily calm. "If you had just given Jenny the card like I asked, none of this would have happened." I lowered my hands, ignoring the pain as I stared at my husband. In that moment, I saw him clearly for the first time in years. This man wasn't the charming real estate agent who'd swept me off my feet at a friend's barbecue. He wasn't the supportive partner who'd held me through my parents' funeral. He was someone else entirely. Someone cruel. Someone dangerous. "Jenny," he said, not taking his eyes off me. "Go get your purse. Becky's going to give you her card now. Aren't you, honey?" The endearment felt like another splash of hot tea. I watched as Jenny hesitated in the doorway, her expression torn between concern and anticipation. She knew what had just happened was wrong, but she still wanted what she'd come for. "No," I said again, my voice hoarse from screaming. "I'm not." Daniel took a step toward me, but this time I didn't flinch. The pain from the tea had awakened something in me, a clarity I hadn't felt in years. "What did you say?" he asked, his voice dropping to that dangerous quiet again. I said no. Each word was clear, deliberate. "And if you touch me again, I'm calling the police." He laughed, the sound sharp and ugly. "The police? And tell them what? That you were being selfish and uncooperative, and I accidentally spilled some tea?" "Daniel," Jenny interrupted, her voice small. "Maybe we should—" "Shut up!" he snapped at her. "This is your fault too. If you weren't so bad with money, if you could just handle your own life for once, we wouldn't be in this situation." I used their distraction to reach for my phone in my pocket. My hands were shaking, but I managed to press the emergency call button. I didn't raise the phone to my ear, just left it connected in my pocket as Daniel turned back to me. "Last chance, Becky," he said, taking another step forward. "Give Jenny your card and we can forget this whole thing happened. I'll even help you clean up." His words hit me like a physical blow. He actually thought we could come back from this, that I would just hand over my card and go back to playing happy families, pretending this afternoon had never happened. "No," I said for the final time. "We're done, Daniel. This marriage is over." The rage that contorted his face should have terrified me, but I felt strangely calm. I heard the front door open, presumably someone responding to my emergency call, just as Daniel reached for me. "You ungrateful bitch," he snarled, grabbing my arm. "After everything I've done for you— Police! Everyone freeze!" The authority in that voice cut through everything else. Daniel dropped my arm immediately, taking a step back. 2 officers appeared in the kitchen doorway, taking in the scene. My tea-soaked clothes, my reddened face, the broken cup on the floor. "Ma'am," one of the officers said to me, "are you all right? Do you need medical attention?" I nodded, feeling tears finally start to fall. He threw hot tea at me because I wouldn't give him my credit card. The next few minutes were a blur of activity. The officers separated us, taking statements. An ambulance was called. Jenny disappeared somewhere in the chaos, though I caught a glimpse of her being questioned by one of the officers. As a paramedic examined my burns, I could hear Daniel's voice from the other room, smooth and reasonable. "It was an accident. She's very emotional. If you knew how much I've done for her." But it didn't matter anymore. His words couldn't reach me. The tea had burned away the last of my illusions, and I knew with absolute certainty that I would never let him hurt me again. The emergency room lights were harsh and unforgiving as I sat on the examination table, still wearing my tea-soaked sweater. The burning sensation had subsided to a dull throb, but every movement sent fresh waves of pain across my chest and neck. A kind-faced nurse named Sarah had given me a hospital gown to change into, but I couldn't bring myself to move just yet. "Mrs. Mitchell?" A doctor entered the room, her white coat pristine against the sterile surroundings. "I'm Dr. Rodriguez. Can you tell me what happened?" I opened my mouth to explain, but the words stuck in my throat. How do you tell a stranger that your husband of 5 years threw scalding tea at you because you refused to fund his sister's latest pyramid scheme? How do you admit that you've been living in fear for so long that this act of violence felt almost inevitable? "Take your time," Dr. Rodriguez said gently, pulling up a chair. "The police officers gave me a brief overview, but I'd like to hear it from you." I took a deep breath, wincing at the way the movement pulled at my burned skin. My husband threw hot tea at me during an argument. The words came out flat, emotionless. He was angry because I wouldn't give my credit card to his sister. Dr. Rodriguez nodded, making notes in her chart. "And this is the first time he's physically hurt you?" I started to nod, then stopped. Was it the first time? What about the bruises from grabbed arms? The accidental shoves? The times he'd thrown things near me but not at me? Where exactly was the line between intimidation and abuse? I'm not sure, I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. The doctor set down her chart and looked at me directly. "Mrs. Mitchell, may I call you Rebecca?" I nodded. "Rebecca, what happened today was assault. The burns on your face, neck, and chest are second degree in some areas. You'll need treatment and follow-up care, but I'm also concerned about your overall safety." Safety. The word echoed in my mind. When was the last time I'd felt truly safe in my own home? "I have some resources I'd like to share with you," Dr. Rodriguez continued, pulling out several pamphlets from her coat pocket. "There's a domestic violence support center here in Portland that provides counseling, legal assistance, and temporary housing if you need it." My first instinct was to protest. I wasn't a victim of domestic violence. That happened to other people, didn't it? But then I remembered the look in Daniel's eyes as he threw the tea. the cold calculation in his voice as he tried to convince the police it was an accident. The way Jenny had hesitated in the doorway, knowing what was happening, was wrong, but still expecting to get my credit card anyway. A soft knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. Officer Chen, one of the police officers from my house, stepped into the room. "Ms. Anderson?" she said, using my maiden name, the name on my credit card, the name that was still mine. "I have an update for you. Your husband has been taken into custody, but he's likely to make bail soon. Do you have somewhere safe you can go?" The reality of my situation hit me like a physical blow. I couldn't go home. Not now, maybe not ever again. Where could I go? Most of my friends had drifted away over the years, pushed aside by Daniel's constant criticism and control. Then I remembered Olivia's text from this morning. "Always here if you need me. Anytime, day or night. You know that, right?" With trembling fingers, I reached for my phone, relieved to find it still working despite the T-splash. As I scrolled to Olivia's number, another text appeared on my screen. It was from Jenny. "I'm so sorry about what happened. But when you're feeling better, maybe we could still talk about Vitality Plus. I know this is bad timing, but the starter kit price goes up next week." I stared at the message in disbelief, a hysterical laugh bubbling up in my throat. Even now, after everything that had happened, she was still trying to get my money. The laugh turned into a sob, and suddenly I was crying. Deep, body-shaking sobs that made my burned skin scream in protest. Dr. Rodriguez handed me a tissue box while Officer Chen waited patiently. When I finally got myself under control, I dialed Olivia's number. She answered on the first ring. "Becky, are you okay? I've been so worried." The concern in her voice brought fresh tears to my eyes. "Liv, I need help. Something happened and I can't go home." "Where are you?" Her response was immediate, no questions asked. "Legacy Emmanuel Medical Center, the emergency room. I'll be there in 15 minutes. Don't move." True to her word, Olivia arrived exactly 15 minutes. Later, bursting into the examination room with her curly hair wild from the rain and her cafe apron still tied around her waist. She took one look at my burned skin and tear-stained face and immediately pulled out her phone. "Nate," she said. When her husband answered, "I need you to get the guest room ready and maybe pick up some comfortable clothes? Size small." "Yes, it's important. I'll explain later." While she made arrangements, Dr. Rodriguez finished examining my burns and gave me instructions for care. First-degree burns on my face, second-degree on my neck and upper chest. "It could have been worse," she said, "if I hadn't jerked back when I did. The tea could have hit my eyes." Officer Chen took more photos for evidence and helped me fill out paperwork for a restraining order. "We'll need you to come down to the station tomorrow to complete your statement," she said. "But for now, focus on getting somewhere safe and taking care of those burns." As Olivia drove me to her house, the reality of my situation began to sink in. I had left my house with nothing but my phone, wallet, and the clothes on my back. Clothes that were now ruined and smelled of earl, gray tea. Everything else, my clothes, my photos, my important documents, was still in the house with Daniel. "We'll figure it out," Olivia said, seeming to read my thoughts. "One step at a time, okay?" We pulled up to her craftsman-style home in southeast Portland. It looked exactly like the kind of place I'd always dreamed of living. Warm, inviting, with window boxes full of flowers and wind chimes tinkling on the porch. So different from the cold, modern aesthetic Daniel had insisted on for our house. Nate met us at the door, his kind face creased with concern. "The guest room's ready," he said. "I picked up some necessities, pajamas, toiletries, that kind of thing. The kids are at my mom's for the night, so you can have some peace and quiet." The mention of peace and quiet brought another wave of tears to my eyes. When was the last time I'd experienced either of those things? In my house, there was always tension, always the need to monitor Daniel's moods, always Jenny's latest crisis demanding attention. Olivia helped me up to the guest room, which was painted a soft sage green and had a quilted bedspread that looked like something my grandmother might have made. On the bed were shopping bags full of new clothes, still with tags attached. "The bathroom's through there," Olivia said, pointing to a door. "Dr. Rodriguez said you can shower as long as you're gentle with the burned areas. I'll make some chamomile tea, unless you'd rather not have tea right now." The question made me laugh despite everything. Maybe just water for now. Left alone in the guest room, I caught sight of myself in the mirror over the dresser. My face was red and blotchy from the burns, my mascara smeared from crying. But it was my eyes that held my attention. They looked different somehow. Clearer, more focused. The fear was still there, but there was something else too. Determination, maybe. Or hope. I peeled off my ruined sweater carefully, wincing as the fabric pulled away from my burned skin. In the bathroom mirror, I could see the full extent of the damage. An angry red patch spreading across my chest and up my neck, already starting to blister in places. Physical evidence of what Daniel had done to me. What I had let him do to me. For far too long. The shower was both agony and relief. The warm water stinging my burns but washing away the lingering smell of tea and the last traces of my life with Daniel. As I dried off and changed into the soft new pajamas Nate had bought, I heard voices downstairs. Olivia talking to someone on the phone. "Yes, we have room." "No, it's not an imposition. As long as she needs." I don't care what he says. She's not going back there. I sat on the edge of the bed, running my fingers over the quilted pattern. Everything felt surreal, like I was watching someone else's life unfold. This morning, I had been making Daniel's breakfast, trying to keep the peace. Now I was in a different house, wearing borrowed clothes, with burns on my skin and a restraining order in process. A light knock at the door pulled me from my thoughts. Olivia entered carrying a glass of water and a small white pharmacy bag. "The prescriptions Dr. Rodriguez called in are ready," she said. "Pain medication and antibiotic cream for the burns. Do you want to try to eat something?" I shook my head. The thought of food made my stomach turn. "Okay," she said, setting everything on the bedside table. "But you should take the pain meds. And Becky?" She waited until I looked at her. "You're safe here. Whatever you need, however long you need to stay, we're here for you." The simple declaration of support broke something open inside me. "I don't know what to do," I whispered. "Everything I own is in that house. My clothes, my papers, my parents' photos." "We'll figure it out," Olivia repeated her earlier promise. "Officer Chen said they can send a police escort when you're ready to get your things. But for tonight, just rest. Tomorrow is soon enough to make plans." As she turned to leave, my phone buzzed with another text. I expected it to be from Daniel or Jenny, but instead it was from Hannah, the manager at the Copper Cup Cafe. "Heard what happened. We have an opening for a full-time position if you're interested. Nothing like serving other people's tea to help you reclaim your power." The message, with its gentle humor and underlying support, brought fresh tears to my eyes. But these were different tears. Not of fear or pain, but of gratitude. Less than 12 hours after my world had imploded, people were already reaching out to help me rebuild it. Sleep didn't come easily that first night in Olivia's guest room. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Daniel's face twisted with rage, felt the scorching tea hitting my skin. The unfamiliar creaks and settling sounds of a different house kept startling me awake. But it wasn't just the physical discomfort or strange surroundings keeping me up. It was the memories. As I lay there in the darkness, my mind kept replaying moments from my relationship with Daniel, but now I was seeing them through new eyes. like watching a movie for the second time and catching all the clues you missed the first time around. I remembered our first date 6 years ago. He'd taken me to an upscale restaurant in the Pearl District, the kind of place my teacher's salary rarely allowed me to visit. When I ordered a glass of wine I liked, he'd corrected me, suggesting something more expensive. At the time, I'd been impressed by his knowledge, flattered by his attention to detail. Now I wondered, had that been the first sign of his need to control everything? The night we got engaged, 4 months after my parents' accident, I'd still been deep in grief, barely functioning. Daniel had been my rock, handling funeral arrangements, dealing with the estate paperwork, making sure I ate and slept. When he proposed, it felt like he was saving me. But had he really been saving me or taking advantage of my vulnerability? Lightning flashed outside the window, illuminating the guest room for a moment. The storm from earlier hadn't let up. If anything, it had gotten stronger. I touched my burns gently, feeling the heat still radiating from my skin despite the medication. The pain kept me anchored in the present, even as my mind continued its journey through the past. Our wedding day. I'd wanted something small, intimate. Daniel had insisted on a large affair at the Portland Art Museum, inviting all his real estate contacts and business associates. Jenny had been my maid of honor, another of Daniel's decisions. She'd lost the original wedding rings during the rehearsal dinner and had to be rushed to buy replacements the morning of the ceremony. Daniel had laughed it off, paying for new ones without hesitation. But he'd held that over my head later. During arguments, remember how understanding I was about the rings? Why can't you be as understanding about Jenny's needs? The sound of rain against the windows grew louder, matching the turbulent flow of my thoughts. I remembered the day we moved into our Lake Oswego house. I'd been excited to decorate, to make it our home. But Daniel had already hired an interior designer, someone who specialized in the modern, minimalist style he preferred. My boxes of books, my comfortable reading chair, my collection of throw pillows, all deemed too cluttered, too shabby. They'd ended up in storage, along with so many other pieces of myself. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, another text from Jenny. Daniel made bail. He's staying at Mom and Dad's. He's really sorry about what happened. Maybe if you just talk to him. I turned the phone face down without replying. Of course he was sorry. He was always sorry after he went too far. But being sorry didn't change anything. Being sorry didn't erase the bruises, heal the burns, or restore my sense of safety. Unable to sleep, I got up carefully and walked to the window. Olivia's street looked different at night, the rain-slicked pavement reflecting the streetlights like scattered stars. A cat darted across the road, seeking shelter from the storm. I thought about all the times I'd stood at my own window, watching Daniel's car pull into the driveway, trying to gauge his mood by the way he walked to the front door. When had I become so hyper-vigilant? When had I started measuring my words, monitoring my actions, modifying my behavior to avoid his anger? It hadn't happened overnight. Like water wearing away at a rock, Daniel's control had eroded my independence so gradually I hardly noticed it happening. First, it was small things. He didn't like the way I dressed for work. Too casual, he said, not befitting the wife of a successful real estate agent. So I changed my wardrobe. He thought my friends from the school were too loud, too unprofessional. So I saw them less and less. He felt my career wasn't ambitious enough. So I quit teaching, the job I'd loved, to help him network and maintain our social obligations. Then there were the bigger things. The joint bank account where my paychecks went but only he had access. The credit cards in his name that I was allowed to use but only with his permission. The one card in my name that he'd been trying to get me to give to Jenny, my last piece of financial independence. A soft knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. Olivia stood there with 2 mugs of what smelled like hot chocolate. "Couldn't sleep either?" she asked, offering me one of the mugs. I shook my head, accepting the drink gratefully. Too much thinking. She settled into the window seat beside me, pulling her legs up under her. Want to talk about it? I keep trying to figure out when it all started going wrong, I said, watching the steam rise from my mug. When I stopped being me and started being just his wife. Olivia was quiet for a moment, letting me gather my thoughts. You know what's crazy? I continued. I keep thinking about my students. Remember last year when you let me help out at the cafe's summer reading program? She nodded, smiling at the memory. There was this little girl, Emma. She was so bright, so full of questions. But whenever she got an answer wrong, she'd apologize over and over. Her mom would pick her up sometimes with fresh bruises, always. With a ready explanation, she's so clumsy, she falls a lot. You know how kids are? My voice cracked. I reported it to Child Services. I fought for that little girl. So why couldn't I fight for myself? Because it's different when you're in it, Olivia said gently. It's like that story about the frog in boiling water. If you put a frog in hot water, it'll jump right out. But if you put it in cool water and heat it slowly, it doesn't realize the danger until it's too late. I should have realized sooner, I whispered, touching my burns again. All the signs were there. The way he isolated me from my friends. How he always sided with Jenny, no matter how ridiculous her demands were. The constant criticism disguised as concern. Even the way he talked about my parents' death, like he was some kind of savior who rescued me from my grief. Lightning flashed again, closer this time. In the brief illumination, I caught sight of my reflection in the window. The burns on my face were starting to blister, creating a mottled pattern across my skin. But beneath the injuries, I could see something else. A glimmer of the woman I used to be. The one who loved teaching, who had dreams and opinions of her own. When my parents died, I said slowly, I lost my compass. Everything that anchored me to who I was. Gone in a single car accident. Daniel stepped in and became my new anchor. But anchors don't just hold you steady, do they? They also hold you back. Olivia reached over and squeezed my hand. Maybe it's time to be your own anchor. Another text lit up my phone screen. This time it was from Daniel. Sweetheart, please come home. We can work this out. I'll get help. I'll do anything you want. Just don't throw away our marriage over one mistake. One mistake. As if the tea incident existed in isolation, separate from years of emotional manipulation and financial control. As if it hadn't been building to this moment from the very beginning. I kept a journal during my first year of teaching, I told Olivia, still staring at Daniel's message. Every night, I'd write about my students, my lessons, my hopes for their futures. After Daniel and I got married, he found it and read it. He said my writing was childish, that I was focusing too much on work and not enough on being a good wife. I stopped writing after that. Do you still have the journal? It's in a box in our storage unit, along with most of my old life. I took a sip of hot chocolate, letting the sweetness wash away the phantom taste of Earl Grey tea. Daniel has the key. Olivia's eyes lit up with determination. Then we'll get a new key. We'll get all your things back, Becky. Everything he took from you, your possessions, your confidence, your independence. We'll get it all back. For the first time since the tea incident, I felt something like hope stirring in my chest. I don't even know where to start. You already started, Olivia said firmly. The moment you said no to giving Jenny your credit card, the moment you stood your ground, that was the start. Everything else is just details we can figure out. Together. The storm outside was beginning to ease, the spaces between lightning and thunder growing longer. As the rain softened to a gentle patter, I felt my racing thoughts begin to calm. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, police statements to give, restraining orders to file, decisions to make about my future. But for now, sitting in the quiet, darkness with my best friend and a cup of hot chocolate, I could finally see the truth about my past. Daniel hadn't saved me after my parents died. He'd simply stepped into the void their loss created, reshaping me into someone who needed saving. Someone who would accept his control as protection, his criticism as care, his anger as passion. But that person wasn't really me. She never had been. Morning light filtered through the sage-colored curtains of Olivia's guest room as I sat cross-legged, on the bed, surrounded by the pamphlets Dr. Rodriguez had given me. Each glossy page outlined different resources, different paths forward, different possibilities for a life I hadn't allowed myself to imagine. The burns on my face and chest had settled into a constant throb, but the pain medication kept it manageable enough for me to think clearly. A gentle knock at the door announced Hannah's arrival. She had come straight from opening the Copper Cup Cafe, bringing with her the comforting smell of fresh coffee and warm pastries. "I brought reinforcements," she said, setting a paper bag on the bedside table. "And some news about that job offer." Olivia appeared behind her, carrying a legal pad and several pens. "I thought we could help you make some plans," she said, settling into the armchair by the window. "Break everything down into manageable steps." Hannah perched on the edge of the bed, carefully avoiding disturbing my nest of pamphlets. "The morning rush is covered at the cafe. We've got all the time you need." The simple act of these two women rearranging their day to help me made my throat tight with emotion. In the years I'd been with Daniel, I'd forgotten what it felt like to have people in my corner who wanted nothing from me except my well-being. "I don't know where to start," I admitted, picking up one of the pamphlets about domestic violence resources. "Everything feels overwhelming." "Let's start with the practical," Hannah suggested, pulling a chocolate croissant from the paper bag and breaking it into sharing-sized pieces. "You need income, a place to live, and your important documents. Everything else can come after that." Olivia uncapped her pen, ready to take notes. "The job at the cafe is yours if you want it. Full-time, with health insurance after 90 days. It's not teaching, but it's independence," I finished, accepting a piece of the croissant. The first bite reminded me I hadn't eaten since yesterday's interrupted lunch. "When can I start?" "Tomorrow, if you're up for it," Hannah said. "We'll work around your schedule with the police and everything else you need to handle." As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a message from Officer Chen, confirming my appointment to give, my official statement that afternoon. Another text followed immediately, Daniel again. "The house feels empty without you. I made your favorite breakfast. Please come home. We can talk about everything." I showed the message to Olivia and Hannah. He keeps switching between apologizing and trying to make me feel guilty. Last night it was all about how sorry he was, how he'll get help. This morning it's about how much he's suffering without me. "Classic manipulation?" Hannah said, her voice hard. She'd left an abusive relationship herself years ago, though I'd only learned this recently. He's trying every button he knows to push, hoping one will work. The hardest part is, I paused, struggling to articulate the confusion in my heart. Part of me still loves the person I thought he was. The man who held me through my parents' funeral, who seemed so strong and caring. Was any of that real? "Maybe it was," Olivia said gently. "But even if it was, it doesn't excuse what he became. You can acknowledge the good memories while still recognizing that the relationship is toxic now." The words hit home in a way nothing else had. I could keep the memories of the good times without using them as a reason to go back. I could honor the past without sacrificing my future. My phone buzzed again, Jenny this time. "Mom and Dad want to have a family meeting. They say we can work this out if everyone just calms down." Daniel agreed to counseling. "Please don't throw away your marriage over one bad day." The message sparked something in me. Not guilt or doubt, but anger. Pure, clarifying anger. "One bad day," I read aloud, my voice shaking. As if yesterday existed in isolation, as if it wasn't the culmination of years of control and manipulation, as if it hadn't been building from the moment I said I do. Olivia was already writing in her legal pad. Channel that anger into action. What do you want your life to look like? Not what Daniel wants, not what his family wants. What do you want? The question stopped me short. What did I want? I'd spent so long considering everyone else's wants and needs that I'd almost forgotten how to want things for myself. I want. I started slowly, then gained momentum. I want to feel safe. I want to make my own decisions about money and work and what I wear and who I spend time with. I want to write in my journal again without anyone reading it and telling me my thoughts are wrong. I want to help people without being called naive. I want to teach again, eventually. Write it all down, Hannah encouraged. Every single thing you want, no matter how small or big it seems. For the next hour, we filled pages with my hopes and dreams, my practical needs and wild aspirations. Some were immediate. Find an apartment, get my documents from the house, file for divorce. Others were longer term, renew my teaching certificate, start a savings account, maybe even write a book someday. As we worked, my phone kept buzzing with messages from Daniel, Jenny, and their parents. Each one tried a different approach. Guilt, love, anger, reason. But with each message, my resolve grew stronger. I could see the manipulation now, the way they all worked together to wear down my boundaries. I need to block their numbers, I said finally, picking up my phone. At least for now. Everything should go through the lawyer once I have one. Speaking of lawyers, Olivia said, I have a recommendation. Her name is Rachel Martinez. She helped my cousin through her divorce last year. She specializes in cases involving domestic violence. The term still made me flinch slightly, but I couldn't deny its accuracy anymore. What happened with the tea wasn't an isolated incident of anger. It was domestic violence, the physical manifestation of years of emotional and financial abuse. Can you call her for me? I asked. See if she can meet soon? While Olivia made the call, Hannah helped me make a list of everything I needed to retrieve from the house. We'll go with the police escort, she said firmly. No trying to sneak back when Daniel's at work. It's too dangerous. The croissant was long gone, but its sweetness lingered as we planned my new life piece by piece. Each decision, each item crossed off our list, felt like reclaiming a small part of myself. Rachel can see you tomorrow morning, Olivia announced, ending her call. 9 a.m., I'll drive you. I looked at the pages of notes we'd generated, each one representing a step toward freedom. The path ahead would be difficult, but for the first time in years, it was my path to choose. There's something else I need to do first, I said, picking up my phone one last time. Before I could second-guess myself, I opened my banking app and transferred every penny from my personal credit card's cashback rewards into a new account, one Daniel had no access to. It wasn't much, but it was a start. More importantly, it was mine. The sound of children playing drifted in through the window. Olivia's kids were due home from their grandparents' house soon. Normal life was continuing all around us, even as I sat here dismantling and rebuilding my entire world. Hannah, I said, turning to face her directly, about that job offer. I want to start today, even if it's just for an hour or two. I need to do something normal, something productive. She smiled. The afternoon shift starts at 3. That gives you time for your police statement and maybe a short training session before we close. You sure you're up for it? I touched my burns gently. They still hurt, but the pain was clarifying rather than debilitating. I need this. I need to prove to myself that I can do something on my own, even if it's just learning to make coffee. You can do anything you set your mind to, Olivia said, squeezing my hand. You already proved that when you stood up to Daniel yesterday. Everything else is just details. A text notification lit up my phone screen one last time before I blocked. The numbers. The police are overreacting. Jenny's devastated. Our parents are disappointed. Is this really how you want things to end? Over a cup of tea? I stared at the message, seeing it for what it was. One last attempt to minimize the abuse, to make me doubt my own experience. But I wasn't that woman anymore, the one who would accept blame for someone else's actions. No, I said out loud, my voice strong and clear. This isn't ending over a cup of tea. This is ending because I choose me. I choose freedom. I choose life. With those words, I blocked their numbers, turned off my phone, and stood up. There were statements to give, jobs to learn, lawyers to meet, and a whole new life to build. But for the first time in years, I was ready to face it all. Not as Daniel's wife, not as Jenny's enabler, but as myself. Just myself. The police station hummed with quiet efficiency as Officer Chen led me through the maze of desks and corridors. My borrowed clothes felt strange against my healing burns, a constant reminder of how much had changed in just 24 hours. The statement I'd just given felt both liberating and terrifying. My words now permanently recorded, the truth of my situation impossible to take back or minimize. Ms. Anderson, Officer Chen said, using my maiden name as she handed me a copy of the restraining order. This is temporary for now, but we'll have a hearing in 2 weeks to make it permanent. Until then, if Daniel comes within 500 feet of you, or if he attempts any contact beyond what's legally necessary through your lawyers, call us immediately. The weight of the paper in my hands felt significant. A legal shield between me and the man I'd once trusted with my life. Rachel Martinez, my newly retained lawyer, reviewed the document carefully before placing it in her briefcase. Now, Rachel said, her voice steady and professional. Let's talk about getting your belongings from the house. The police can provide an escort tomorrow morning at 10. I suggest we make it quick and focused, essential items only. Documents, irreplaceable personal items, anything of significant financial or sentimental value. The thought of returning to the house made my stomach clench, but I nodded. Daniel has a showing scheduled for tomorrow morning. He never misses those, no matter what's happening in his personal life. Perfect, Rachel replied, making a note in her planner. That reduces the chance of confrontation. Do you have a list prepared? I pulled out the carefully written inventory Olivia had helped me create. Important documents first: birth certificate, social security card, passport, teaching credentials, bank statements. Then practical items: clothes, laptop, essential toiletries. Finally, the irreplaceables: my parents' photo albums, my grandmother's jewelry, my teaching journals. The storage unit, I remembered suddenly. Daniel has things of mine in storage: furniture, books, mementos, things he said didn't fit his aesthetic. Rachel's expression hardened slightly. Classic controlling behavior, removing your personal items to erase your identity from the shared space. We'll add the storage unit to our list of assets to discuss during divorce proceedings. For now, let's focus on what's in the house. As we finalized the plans for tomorrow's retrieval, my phone vibrated with a message from Hannah. My first shift at the Copper Cup had gone well, despite my nervousness and the curious looks from customers who noticed my burns. The simple act of learning something new, how to operate the espresso machine, the proper way to steam milk, the cafe's special recipes, had given me a sense of accomplishment I hadn't felt in years. Officer Chen walked us out to the parking lot, where Olivia was waiting to drive me to my afternoon appointment with the domestic violence counselor. The Portland rain had finally stopped, leaving everything looking clean and renewed. Remember, Officer Chen said as we prepared to leave, document everything. Any attempts at contact, any suspicious activity, any threats or promises from Daniel or his family. It all helps build your case. The counseling center was housed in a modest building near Washington Park, its entrance partially hidden by flowering rhododendrons. The waiting room walls were covered with artwork created by survivors, paintings, collages, and photographs that told stories of pain and healing. My counselor, Grace Sullivan, had kind eyes and a quiet strength about her. Her office felt more like a living room than a clinical space, with comfortable chairs and soft lighting. She listened without judgment as I shared my story, occasionally asking gentle questions that helped me see patterns I hadn't recognized before. Financial abuse often goes hand in hand with emotional and physical abuse, she explained. The gradual erosion of independence, the constant demands from family members, the control over your career choices. These are all forms of abuse that can be just as damaging as physical violence. Her words helped me understand why the E.T. incident had been such a turning point. It wasn't just the physical pain or the shock of the attack. It was the way it had made visible what had been invisible for so long. After the session, Olivia drove me to the bank where I'd arranged to open a new account. The banker, a woman named Sarah, helped me set up everything under my maiden name, with security measures in place to prevent unauthorized access. "We see this more often than you might think," she said quietly as she processed the paperwork. "There's a reason domestic violence resources recommend establishing separate finances as one of the first steps toward independence." Back at Olivia's house, we found Nate and the kids setting up for a movie night. 10-year-old Maya immediately ran to hug me, careful of my burns. Her 7-year-old brother Lucas followed more shyly, offering me a drawing he'd made. "It's you. Making coffee," he explained proudly. "Mom said you're going to work at the Copper Cup like Hannah." The simple picture, a stick figure behind a counter, surrounded by cups and hearts, brought tears to my eyes. This was what family should feel like: unconditional love, support without demands, acceptance without judgment. That evening, as we all gathered in the living room for pizza and movies, my phone buzzed with an email from Rachel. She'd filed the initial divorce paperwork and had a strategy meeting scheduled for next week. The subject line was simple but powerful. Moving forward. Later, alone in the guest room, I opened my new journal, a gift from Hannah during my training shift. The blank pages seemed to hold infinite possibilities. I began to write, not about Daniel or the tea incident, but about my hopes for the future, about teaching again someday, about maybe having my own apartment filled with books and comfortable furniture, about rebuilding friendships and rediscovering old passions. A soft tap at the door interrupted my writing. Maya stood there in her pajamas, holding something behind her back. "Mom said you might not want tea anymore," she said seriously. "So I made you hot chocolate, with extra marshmallows, because marshmallows make everything better." The simple gesture of kindness from this child who barely knew me but offered comfort anyway made something shift inside my heart. This was what healing looked like. Not one dramatic moment, but a series of small kindnesses, tiny steps forward, gentle reminders that I deserved better. I took the hot chocolate, making room for Maya to sit beside me on the bed. She pointed to my journal. "What are you writing about?" "The future," I said, sipping the sweet drink. "About all the possibilities ahead." She nodded sagely. "Mom says you're brave. She says you're like a butterfly coming out of a cocoon." The metaphor struck me as particularly apt. The process of emerging from a cocoon was supposed to be difficult. The struggle itself was what made the butterfly strong enough to fly. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Going back to the house, facing the physical remnants of my life with Daniel, beginning the long process of disentangling our lives legally and financially. But tonight, sitting with this sweet child, drinking hot chocolate and writing about the future, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Peace. Maya fell asleep leaning against my shoulder as I continued writing, filling pages with plans and dreams. Outside, the Portland night was clear, for the first time in days, stars visible between the branches of Olivia's maple tree. Each star seemed to represent a possibility, a potential path forward. I touched my healing burns gently, feeling the way the skin was already beginning to repair itself. The human body was remarkable in its ability to heal, to grow stronger at the broken places. The heart, I was learning, could do the same. Morning frost coated the windows of the police cruiser as we pulled up to my former home. The Lake Oswego street was quiet, most residents already gone for work. Daniel's BMW was noticeably absent from the driveway, just as we'd planned. Officer Chen parked behind the moving truck Nate had borrowed from his construction company. 20 minutes, she reminded me gently. We want to be gone before he returns from his showing. Are your friends ready? Through the rear window, I could see Olivia, Hannah, and Marcus from the cafe pulling on work gloves. They'd all taken the morning off to help, forming an efficient moving crew. Rachel Martinez stood by her car, phone in hand, ready to document everything we removed from the house. The key felt heavy in my hand as I approached the front door. Just 4 days had passed since I'd fled this house, but it felt like stepping into another lifetime. The normally immaculate entryway showed signs of chaos, mail scattered across the floor, Daniel's coffee cup unwashed in the sink, yesterday's newspaper spread across the kitchen counter. Stay focused, Rachel called softly from behind me. Remember our list, bedroom and office first. We moved through the house like a well-orchestrated team. Hannah and Marcus tackled the bedroom closet, carefully packing my clothes into labeled boxes. Olivia handled the bathroom, gathering my toiletries and medications. I focused on the important documents stored in the home office, Rachel by my side photographing everything we took. In the back of my closet, behind designer dresses I'd never felt comfortable wearing, I found a box I'd almost forgotten about. Inside were mementos from my teaching days, hand-drawn cards from students, photographs of class projects, lesson plans I'd been particularly proud of. Daniel had insisted I store them away, claiming they didn't fit with our new life. Now they felt like treasures, pieces of my true self preserved in cardboard and memories. Rebecca. Officer Chen's voice carried up the stairs. 15 minutes. The urgency in her tone spurred us to move faster. Hannah discovered my jewelry box hidden in Daniel's dresser, including my grandmother's pearl necklace that he'd claimed was at the jeweler's being cleaned. Marcus found my laptop buried under files in the office. Olivia emerged from the garage with boxes of holiday decorations Daniel had deemed too festive for our modern aesthetic. As we worked, evidence of Daniel's controlling nature became impossible to ignore. My belongings had been systematically hidden, relocated or disposed of, scattered throughout the house in places I rarely looked. It was as if he'd been slowly erasing me, piece by piece, replacing everything that made me unique with his own carefully curated version of a perfect wife. 10 minutes, Officer Chen called. In the kitchen, I paused at the spot where the tea incident had occurred. The floor had been meticulously cleaned, all evidence of violence erased. But on the counter sat a new box of my favorite Earl Grey tea, Daniel's latest attempt at manipulation. Beside it lay a handwritten note. I miss our morning routine. Please come home. Leave it, Rachel said firmly, noting my hesitation. It's all documented in the police report. Focus on what you need, not what he wants you to see. A photo on the refrigerator caught my eye. Daniel and me at his company Christmas party last year. I was wearing a dress he'd chosen, my smile, tight and artificial. I removed the photo, not to keep, but to remind myself how far I'd come in just a few days. 5 minutes! We did a final sweep of the house, making sure we hadn't missed anything crucial. In my haste to check the guest room closet, I knocked over a stack of mail. As I gathered the scattered envelopes, a bank statement caught my eye. It was addressed to Jenny, but delivered to our house. Curious, I opened it and felt my heart stop. The statement showed regular transfers from our joint account to Jenny's personal account, dating back months. Small amounts, never more than a few $100s at a time, but adding up to thousands. Daniel had been secretly funding his sister's schemes all along, while simultaneously pressuring me to hand over my credit card. "Rebecca," Officer Chen's voice was urgent now. "We need to leave. Now." Rachel quickly photographed the bank statement before adding it to our evidence file. We hurried to the moving truck, loading the last boxes as a familiar black BMW turned onto the street. "Everyone in your vehicles," Officer Chen commanded. "Ms. Anderson, you're with me." Through the cruiser's window, I watched Daniel's car speed up as he recognized the moving truck in his driveway. But it was too late. We were already pulling away, my belongings safely secured, my support team forming a protective convoy. We regrouped at the Copper Cup, turning the cafe's back room into a temporary storage space. As my friends helped unload boxes, customers offered encouraging smiles and supportive words. News travels fast in Portland's close-knit communities, and the cafe's regulars had quickly become unofficial members of my support network. "You should see this," Hannah said, bringing me a cup of chamomile tea, my new preferred drink. She held up her phone, showing me a social media post from Jenny. "Some people pretend to be victims when they're really just selfish. Family should come first." The words would have devastated me a week ago. Now they only strengthened my resolve. "Family should come first," I agreed, taking a sip of tea. "But real family lifts you up, they don't tear you down." As if to prove my point, the cafe door chimed as Maya and Lucas burst in after school, full of excitement about helping me organize my rescued belongings. Behind them, Nate carried boxes of pizza for what had become our regular family dinner gathering. That evening, surrounded by physical reminders of my past and people invested in my future, I began to truly understand the difference between obligation and love, between control and support. My new friends, my chosen family, asked for nothing in return for their help. Their support came without conditions, their love without demands. Grace, my counselor, had explained that rebuilding a support network was crucial for survivors of domestic abuse. "Abusers isolate their victims," she'd said. "Breaking that isolation is a vital step in breaking the cycle of abuse." Looking around the cafe at the people who'd rallied around me, Olivia managing the impromptu storage system, Hannah training me on coffee preparations between moving boxes, Marcus entertaining the kids with hot chocolate art, Nate discussing security measures with Officer Chen, Rachel organizing our growing evidence file, I realized I wasn't just breaking the cycle of abuse. I was building something new, something stronger. My phone buzzed with a message from the domestic violence support group Grace had recommended. They were offering a workshop on financial independence, followed by a session on rebuilding self-esteem. The old me would have been too ashamed to attend, too worried about appearances. The new me marked both sessions in my calendar. As the evening wound down, Maya presented me with another drawing. This one showed a crowd of stick figures surrounding a central figure with a huge smile. "It's your new family," she explained. "See? There's Mom and Dad, and Hannah and Marcus, and Officer Chen, and Ms. Rachel, and me and Lucas, and all the people who come to the cafe. And you're in the middle, but you're not alone anymore." I hugged her tightly, careful of my healing burns. The physical pain was fading, but more importantly, the emotional wounds were beginning to heal. Each person in this room had played a part in that healing, offering different forms of support that together created a safety net I never knew I needed. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Rachel was preparing for our first court appearance. Grace wanted to discuss long-term therapy options, and Hannah had promised to start my barista certification training. But tonight, looking at Maya's drawing with its crowd of loving stick figures, I knew I could face whatever came next. Not because I was stronger, though I was, but because I wasn't facing it alone. Steam rose from the espresso machine. As I practiced making another latte, the morning sun streaming through the Copper Cup's windows. 2 weeks had passed since I'd retrieved my belongings from Daniel's house, and the rhythm of cafe life was becoming second nature. The soft whir of grinding beans, the gentle hiss of steaming milk, the quiet murmur of regular customers. These sounds had replaced the tense silence of my former home. Hannah watched as I carefully poured the steamed milk, creating a passable heart pattern on the surface. "You're getting better," she said, pride evident in her voice. "Soon, you'll be ready for the morning rush by yourself." The cafe was empty this early, giving me time to perfect my technique before customers arrived. My burns had faded to pink patches of healing skin, still tender, but no longer requiring bandages. Regulars had stopped staring, and new customers, rarely noticed unless the light hit my face just right. The bell above the door chimed, and Ms. Patricia Thompson walked in. The elderly landlady owned several properties in the Selwood neighborhood, including a small apartment building she'd mentioned to Olivia. She ordered her usual, an Americano with room for cream, and settled at the counter. "Still interested in that studio apartment?" she asked, watching me work on her drink. "The current tenant moves out next week. It's small, but it has good light and a separate entrance, perfect for someone starting fresh." My hands trembled slightly as I handed her the coffee. The prospect of my own place, even a tiny studio, filled me with equal parts excitement and terror. Olivia and Nate had made it clear I could stay with them as long as I needed, but the idea of having a space that was truly mine was tempting. Could I see it? The words came out before I could second-guess myself. "I have a break at 10. Patricia's face lit up. "I'll pick you up. Bring your pay stubs and bank statements. The sooner we get the paperwork started, the better." As she left, Hannah squeezed my shoulder. "Ready to fly solo, little bird?" The nickname made me smile. Hannah had started calling me that after I'd confided about Maya's butterfly metaphor. Maybe. The apartment's only 6 blocks from here. I could walk to work. The morning passed in a blur of customers and coffee orders. By 10, I'd mastered heart patterns in my lattes and was working on more complex designs. Each small achievement felt significant. Proof that I could learn, grow, create something new. Patricia's car smelled of peppermint and leather as she drove me through the tree-lined streets of Selwood. The apartment building was a converted Victorian, painted a cheerful yellow with white trim. My potential studio was on the ground floor, with large windows and its own small porch. "It's not much," Patricia said, unlocking the door. "But it's clean, secure, and the utilities are included in the rent." The space was indeed small, just one room plus a tiny bathroom and kitchenette. But the windows filled it with natural light, and the hardwood floors gleamed. A built-in bookshelf covered one wall, perfect for the books I'd rescued from storage. I could already picture my reading chair in the corner, my grandmother's quilt on the bed, my photos and artwork bringing life to the white walls. "The neighborhood is safe," Patricia continued. "Lots of families, good lighting at night. The coffee shop where I found you this morning is just down the street, and there's a library branch 2 blocks over." I wandered to the windows, looking out at the small garden shared by the building's tenants. An elderly woman was tending to a plot of herbs, while a young couple played with their dog on the lawn. Normal, peaceful life happening right outside my potential home. "How much?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Patricia named a figure that was surprisingly reasonable, less than I'd expected for Portland's rental market. "First month's rent and security deposit required up front, of course, but given your situation," she hesitated. "I'm willing to be flexible with the deposit if you can provide an extra reference." Tears pricked at my eyes. Word had spread through the neighborhood about what happened, about why I was looking for a fresh start. Instead of judgment, I kept encountering kindness. "Olivia's already offered to co-sign if needed," I said. "And I have pay stubs from the cafe, plus some savings. I didn't mention that those savings were from years of squirreling away cash back. Rewards on my credit card, preparing for a day I'd hoped would never come. Patricia nodded approvingly. Let's get the paperwork started. The sooner you're settled, the sooner you can truly begin healing. Back at the cafe, I shared the news with Hannah during our afternoon lull. She immediately began planning a housewarming party, listing essential items I'd need for my new space. We can check thrift stores this weekend, she suggested. You some dishes, maybe a small table. Marcus's brother works at a furniture store. He might be able to get you a deal on a bed. The cafe door opened, bringing a gust of autumn air and a familiar face. Grace Sullivan, my counselor, walked in with another woman I recognized from the domestic violence support group. They ordered drinks and settled at a corner table, giving me encouraging waves. I'd been attending group sessions twice a week, finding strength in shared stories and solidarity in survival. Each woman's journey was different, but the patterns were painfully similar. The gradual isolation, the financial control, the moment when everything changed. The afternoon crowd began trickling in as I prepared Grace's herbal tea. Young mothers, with strollers, students with laptops, remote workers seeking caffeine and community, regular customers who'd witnessed my progress from shaky newcomer to confident barista. Each interaction, however small, helped rebuild my sense of connection to the world. My phone buzzed. A message from Rachel Martinez. The court date for the permanent restraining order was set for next week. Daniel's lawyer had requested a hearing to contest it, but Rachel was confident. We had documentation, photographs, witness statements. The truth was on our side. Another message followed, this one from my bank. The separate account I'd opened was growing slowly but steadily with each paycheck. Small amounts, but they were mine. No one else had access. No one else could decide how they were spent. The afternoon sun slanted through the cafe windows, creating patterns on the wooden floor. A young woman about my age sat at the counter, grading papers between sips of coffee. She caught me watching and smiled. First-year teacher, she explained, gesturing to the stack of assignments. Sometimes I need a change of scenery from my classroom. My heart ached with unexpected longing. I used to teach elementary school, I said softly. 3rd grade. Her eyes lit up. Really? We're always looking for good teachers. The district's desperate for experienced educators, especially in the primary grades. We talked shop for a while, classroom management strategies, curriculum. Changes, the challenges of teaching in a digital age. Each word awakened memories of who I'd been before Daniel, before I'd let someone else define my worth. You should consider coming back, she said as she packed up her papers. Teaching's not just a job, it's a calling. Once it's in your blood. She trailed off, smiling. Well, you know. I did know. Standing behind the cafe counter, I watched her leave and allowed myself to imagine a different future. Not just survival, but revival. Not just healing, but growing. The rest of my shift passed in a pleasant rhythm of customers and conversations. Hannah taught me how to close the cafe, trusting me with keys and alarm codes. Each small responsibility felt like a step toward normalcy. Walking back to Olivia's house in the evening light, I took a different route, past my potential new apartment. The windows glowed warmly, the current tenant's life visible in silhouette. Soon those windows would be mine. That space would hold my story. Maya was waiting on Olivia's porch, homework spread around her like a paper fan. Did you see the apartment? Is it perfect? Can I help you decorate? I sat beside her, sharing her excitement. It's small but lovely, and yes, I'd love your help decorating. Maybe you could make some art for the walls? She bounced with enthusiasm, already planning color schemes and themes. Her joy was infectious, untainted by adult complexities. Inside, Olivia was cooking dinner while Nate helped Lucas with math homework. The scene was so ordinary, so peaceful. Everything my life with Daniel hadn't been. They looked up as I entered, their faces warm with genuine welcome. "Well?" Olivia asked, stirring something that smelled delicious. "Are you going to be our neighbor?" I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. Olivia abandoned, her cooking to hug me while Maya danced around us chanting, "She's staying. She's staying." Later that night, I sat in the guest room, soon to be just a memory, and opened my journal. The pages were filling with more than just plans now. They held dreams, hopes, small victories, and big revelations. Today's entry would mark another milestone, finding a home of my own. As I wrote, I thought about the teacher from the cafe, about the possibility of returning to education. Not yet. I needed time to heal, to rebuild, to find my footing. But someday, the dream wasn't dead, just dormant. My phone lit up with a final message for the day, from Rachel Martinez. She'd received notice that Daniel's lawyer wanted to discuss a settlement. He was willing to divide our assets without a lengthy court battle, in exchange for dropping the charges related to the tea incident. The old me might have been tempted, might have chosen peace over justice, but I'd learned that real peace doesn't come from avoiding conflict. It comes from facing truth, no matter how painful. I typed a reply. No deal. Some things matter more than money. Closing my journal, I walked to the window. The night was clear, stars visible between Portland's ever-present clouds. Somewhere in this city, Daniel was probably in his perfectly decorated house, drinking his perfectly prepared tea, planning his next move. But his plans no longer controlled my future. Tomorrow would bring more steps forward. Apartment paperwork to complete, court preparations to make, coffee techniques to master. But tonight, I allowed myself to simply exist in this moment of possibility. The burns on my face were healing, marking my skin with a story of survival. But more importantly, my spirit was healing, growing stronger with each small act of independence. My new life was taking shape, one carefully poured latte, one counseling session, one journal entry at a time. It wasn't perfect or polished like the life Daniel had chosen for me. It was messy and challenging and sometimes terrifying, but it was mine. The courthouse loomed before me, its stone facade austere against the autumn sky. Rachel Martinez stood beside me, her briefcase heavy with evidence of my past life. Photographs of burns, police reports, bank statements showing years of financial manipulation. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of rain and fallen leaves. "Remember," Rachel said as we climbed the courthouse steps, "you only need to tell the truth. Your story is enough." The marble hallway echoed with footsteps and whispered conversations. Other people's lives in crisis or transition, all contained within these formal walls. A young couple signing divorce papers, an elderly man updating his will, a mother seeking custody of her children. Each face held its own story of endings and beginnings. We paused outside courtroom C, where a small group had already gathered. My heart stuttered as I recognized them. Daniel in his best suit, Jenny clutching her designer purse, their parents presenting a united front of disapproval. Daniel's lawyer, James Wilson, stood slightly apart, reviewing documents with practiced indifference. Officer Chen appeared at my side, a steady presence in uniform. Behind her came my own support system, Olivia and Hannah, Grace from the counseling center, even Ms. Patricia, my new landlady. They created a barrier between me and my former family, their presence a reminder that I wasn't alone. "All rise!" the bailiff called as we filed into the courtroom. Judge Martinez, no relation to Rachel, she'd assured me, surveyed the room with experienced eyes. The proceedings began with formal introductions, legal terminology washing over me like waves. James Wilson spoke first, his voice smooth and reasonable. Your Honor, this is a simple misunderstanding between a loving husband and his wife. Mr. Mitchell admits to losing his temper during a family disagreement, but the incident has been greatly exaggerated. He's willing to attend anger management classes, couples counseling, whatever it takes to save his marriage. Rachel stood, her posture radiating controlled anger. Your Honor, this is not a simple misunderstanding. We have documented evidence of long-term abuse, physical, emotional, and financial. The incident with the tea was merely the breaking point in a pattern of escalating control and violence. The judge reviewed the photographs of my burns, the police reports, the bank statements showing Daniel's secret transfers to Jenny. Each piece of evidence was a fragment of my story, building a picture of the life I'd fled. Mr. Mitchell, Judge Martinez said, would you like to address the court? Daniel stood, straightening his tie. He'd gotten a haircut for the occasion, his appearance calculated to project respectability and remorse. Your Honor, I love my wife. The incident with the tea was a terrible mistake, one I regret deeply. Becky knows I would never intentionally hurt her. We were discussing a family matter. Things got heated, and I reacted poorly. But I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make things right. His voice held the same persuasive charm that had first attracted me, the same reasonable tone that had made me doubt my own perceptions for so long. But now I could see through it, recognize the manipulation beneath the polish. Ms. Anderson, the judge turned to me using my maiden name. Would you like to respond? I stood on shaking legs, feeling the weight of all eyes in the courtroom. The prepared statement in my hand suddenly felt inadequate. Instead, I spoke from my heart. The day Daniel threw tea at me wasn't a mistake or an accident. It was the moment I finally saw our relationship clearly. For years, he isolated me from friends and family. He controlled our finances, criticized my choices, and slowly erased everything that made me who I was. The tea incident wasn't the beginning of abuse. It was just the first time it left visible marks. My voice grew stronger as I continued. Daniel says he loves me, but love doesn't demand submission. Love doesn't leave burns on your skin or bruises on your soul. Love doesn't make you afraid to say no. Jenny made a sound of protest, but Judge Martinez silenced her with a look. I pressed on, my words gaining momentum. I'm not here seeking revenge. I'm here seeking protection, not just from physical violence, but from the psychological warfare that made me doubt my own worth. I'm here because every person deserves to feel safe in their own life. The courtroom fell silent as I finished speaking. Even James Wilson looked uncomfortable, shuffling his papers with unusual agitation. Daniel's face had lost its practiced remorse, revealing flashes of the anger I knew so well. Judge Martinez reviewed the evidence one final time before speaking. Based on the documentation provided and the testimony heard today, I am granting a permanent restraining order. Mr. Mitchell must maintain a distance of at least 500 feet from Ms. Anderson at all times. This includes her residence, place of work, and any location where she is known to be present. Additionally, all communication must go through legal representatives during divorce proceedings. The words fell like hammer blows in the quiet courtroom. Daniel's hands clenched into fists as the judge continued listing restrictions. No contact through third parties, no social media monitoring, no attempts to access joint accounts without legal oversight. As the judge finished speaking, Jenny jumped up. This is ridiculous! She's tearing our family apart over a cup of tea. Daniel has given her everything, and this is how she repays him? Ms. Mitchell, Judge Martinez's voice cut through Jenny's outburst. If you cannot maintain decorum, you will be removed from this courtroom. Additionally, the financial records submitted show concerning patterns of unauthorized transfers from joint accounts to your personal account. I strongly suggest you seek legal counsel of your own. Jenny's face paled as she sank back into her seat. Daniel and his parents sat rigid with barely contained fury as Rachel gathered our documents, adding the judge's orders to her file. Outside the courtroom, Daniel's lawyer approached Rachel with a new settlement offer for the divorce. The numbers were generous, more than fair on paper. But Rachel recognized it for what it was: another attempt at control, trying to buy my silence and quick compliance. "We'll review all offers during proper negotiations," Rachel said firmly, steering me toward the exit. "For now, the restraining order is our priority." The autumn air felt cleaner somehow as we left the courthouse. My support group surrounded me, creating a protective circle as Daniel and his family emerged behind us. I heard Jenny's voice, shrill with indignation, and Daniel's lower tones attempting to calm her. Officer Chen stepped forward. "Mr. Mitchell, please maintain the court-ordered distance. This is your only warning." I watched as Daniel guided his family toward their cars, his movements stiff with suppressed rage. For the first time, I saw him clearly. Not as the charming man who'd swept me off my feet, not as the controlling husband who dimmed my light, but as someone whose power over me was finally broken. Hannah touched my arm gently. "Ready for your shift? The afternoon? Rush will be starting soon." The normality of the question made me laugh, despite the emotional weight of the morning. "Actually, yes. Making coffee sounds perfect right now." The Copper Cup was busy when we arrived, but conversations paused as we entered. Word had spread about the hearing, and our regulars waited anxiously for news. When Hannah announced the restraining order had been granted, spontaneous applause broke out. Marcus handed me my apron with a flourish. "Welcome back, warrior barista." The afternoon passed in a blur of customers and coffee orders. Each familiar task helped ground me after the intensity of the morning. Steam milk, pull shots, create, latte art, repeat. Simple actions that required focus and skill, leaving no room for dwelling on courtroom drama. A young woman came in near closing time, her own fading bruises partially hidden by makeup. She ordered a simple coffee but lingered at the counter, watching me work. Finally, she spoke in a near whisper. "I saw you at the courthouse today. I have a hearing next week. Did it help? Getting the restraining order?" Setting aside my cleaning cloth, I gave her my full attention. "It helped legally, yes. But the real help came from accepting that I deserved better. From letting people support me. From learning to trust my own voice again." She nodded, tears forming in her eyes. I wrote Grace's number on her receipt, along with the times for support group meetings. "You're not alone," I told her. "Whatever you decide to do, there are people who will help." After she left, I found myself thinking about all the invisible threads connecting survivors. How many others were out there, watching their tea steep or coffee brew, wondering if they were strong enough to leave? How many needed to hear that they deserved better? The sun was setting as I walked to my new apartment, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. My tiny studio welcomed me with quiet comfort. No echoing emptiness, no elaborate decorations, just simple furniture and meaningful treasures. Maya's artwork brightened the walls, my rescued books filled the shelves, and my grandmother's quilt added warmth to the bed. A message from Rachel waited on my phone. The divorce proceedings would begin next week. Daniel's lawyers were pushing for a quick settlement, hoping to resolve things quietly. But I wasn't interested in quick or quiet anymore. I wanted justice, not just for myself, but for every person trapped in the cycle of abuse. Opening my journal, I began to write about the day, not just the legal victory, but the smaller moments of triumph. The way I'd found my voice in the courtroom, the connection with the young woman at the cafe, the feeling of walking into my own space, decorated with my own choices. A soft knock at my door revealed Olivia holding dinner from our favorite Thai restaurant. "Thought you might want company," she said, setting out containers of pad thai and green curry. "Unless you'd rather be alone." The question itself was a gift. The recognition that I had choices, that my preferences mattered. Company. Would be nice, I said, getting plates from my tiny kitchen. It was an intense day, as we ate, sharing spring rolls and stories. I felt the last tension from the courthouse fade. Daniel might have taken years of my life, but he couldn't take my future. That belonged to me alone. The burns on my face had healed to faint pink, marks, barely visible unless you knew where to look. But their legacy remained, not as a reminder of victimhood, but as proof of survival. Each scar told a story of strength, of choices made and boundaries drawn. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, divorce negotiations, continued healing, small steps toward reclaiming my teaching career. But tonight, sitting in my own space sharing dinner with a true friend, I felt something that had been missing from my life with Daniel: peace. The restraining order was more than just legal protection. It was a declaration of independence, a statement that my safety mattered, my choices counted, my voice deserved to be heard. In that courtroom, I'd stood up not just to Daniel, but to every doubt he'd ever planted in my mind. Later, alone in my apartment, I stood at the window watching the city lights twinkle through autumn leaves. Somewhere out there, Daniel was probably raging against the loss of control. Jenny was likely playing victim to anyone who would listen, but their drama no longer defined my story. My phone buzzed with messages of support, from Hannah sharing cafe triumphs, from Grace praising my courtroom courage, from Maya sending pictures of her latest artwork. Each message represented a thread in the tapestry of my new life, stronger and more vibrant than anything I'd had before. The young woman from the cafe stayed in my thoughts. Tomorrow, I decided, I would ask Rachel about speaking at support groups, sharing my story with others who needed to hear that escape was possible. Every survivor's journey was different, but the first step was always the same: believing you deserved better. Autumn rain tapped against the windows of Grace's office as our counseling group settled into the familiar circle of chairs. Steam rose from paper cups of coffee, provided by the copper cup, my contribution to these weekly meetings. The room felt warmer than usual, filled with women at various stages of their healing journeys. Tonight was my turn to share. The restraining order hearing had sparked interest among other survivors, and Grace thought my story might help those still struggling with their decisions to leave. My hands trembled slightly as I held my coffee, but my voice remained steady. A month ago, I wouldn't have believed I could be sitting here, I began. I was so caught up in maintaining the perfect image of a perfect marriage that I'd forgotten what real happiness felt like. It took a cup of hot tea to wake me up, literally and figuratively. Sarah, a newcomer to the group, leaned forward. Her wrist bore a fresh cast. Her eyes carried shadows of recent trauma. I recognized the look, the mixture of hope and fear that came with first steps toward freedom. The hardest part wasn't leaving, I continued. It wasn't even the physical pain of the burns. It was admitting to myself that the life I'd built with Daniel was based on lies, that the man I married had slowly, systematically dismantled everything that made me who I was. The room remained silent, each woman processing my words through the lens of her own experience. Claire, 3 months into her separation, nodded in understanding. Maria, still living with her abusive partner, twisted her wedding ring anxiously. "But here's what I've learned," I said, meeting each woman's gaze. "We're stronger than we know. The same survival instincts that helped us endure abuse can help us escape it. Every small act of defiance, saying no to a demand, hiding money away, reaching out for help, these are acts of courage." Grace interjected gently. "Tell them about your job, Rebecca. About rebuilding your independence." A smile crossed my face as I thought about the copper cup, my sanctuary of steam and coffee beans. I started as a novice barista, barely able to make a decent cup of coffee. Now I'm training new employees, managing shifts, reconnecting with my community one latte at a time. It's not the teaching career I left behind, but it's taught me something valuable. I can learn, grow, create a new life on my own terms. The discussion flowed naturally from there. Women shared their fears about financial independence, about legal battles, about starting over. Each concern was met with practical advice and emotional support. Phone numbers were exchanged, resources shared, bonds strengthened. After the meeting, Sarah approached me privately. "My husband," she whispered, glancing at her cast. "He says he's sorry, says it'll never happen again. I want to believe him, but deep down you know it will," I finished softly. "The apologies are part of the cycle. I have a spare room in my apartment if you need a safe place to stay." Her eyes widened at the offer, then filled with tears. I wrote down my address and phone number, adding the Copper Cup's location as a safe meeting spot. "When you're ready," I said, "we'll be there." The rain had intensified as I walked home, but I barely noticed. My mind was on Sarah, on all the women like her still trapped in the cycle of abuse and apologies. The same cycle I'd been caught in until that fateful day with the tea. My phone buzzed. Rachel Martinez with an update on the divorce proceedings. Daniel's lawyers had presented another settlement offer, this time with additional conditions. He would agree to a generous financial settlement if I signed a non-disclosure agreement about the tea incident and withdrew my police report. Standing under a streetlight, I typed my response. "No amount of money is worth silencing the truth. Proceed with the original plan." My tiny apartment welcomed me with the soft glow of lamplight. Maya's latest artwork, a watercolor series, she called Healing Hearts, added splashes of color to the walls. The space might be small, but every item in it reflected my choices, my taste, my growing sense of self. Opening my laptop, I began working on the application to renew my teaching certificate. The process would take time, but each step brought me closer to reclaiming my profession. The Domestic Violence Support Center had connected me with a program that helped survivors rebuild their careers, offering guidance and small grants for education. A message popped up from Jenny. "Mom's sick. She's asking for you. Can't we put aside our differences for family?" The manipulation was so obvious now that it almost made me laugh. I forwarded the message to Rachel without responding. Every contact attempt would be documented, building our case for maintaining the restraining order. Sleep came easily that night, my dreams untroubled by memories of Daniel's anger or Jenny's demands. Instead, I dreamed of my third-grade classroom, of eager young faces and books waiting to be discovered. In the dream, I was teaching a lesson about butterflies emerging from cocoons, about the strength required to break free and spread new wings. Morning light found me at the Copper Cup, training a new barista named Michael. His hands shook as he attempted his first latte art, reminding me of my own early days behind the counter. "It takes practice," I assured him. But that's true of most worthwhile things in life. The morning rush brought its usual parade of regulars: lawyers from downtown, teachers from the nearby school, parents after dropping off their kids. Each interaction was an opportunity to practice normalcy, to remember that life continued beyond trauma. Between customers, Hannah showed me the cafe's books. "We're thinking of opening a second location," she said. "How would you feel about managing this one?" The offer stunned me. "Me? But I've only been here a few months." "You have natural leadership skills," she replied. "Plus, you connect with people. That's something that can't be taught." Before I could respond, Officer Chen walked in. She ordered her usual Americano and waited until the morning rush subsided before speaking privately with me. "There's been a development," she said quietly. "Another woman has come forward with allegations against Daniel. Similar pattern: financial control, emotional abuse, physical intimidation. She saw your story and recognized her own experience. my hand stilled on the espresso machine. When? Before you. She was a client who became romantically involved with him during her divorce. He represented her house sale. Officer Chen's eyes were gentle but determined. Her testimony could strengthen the case against him, especially regarding the pattern of behavior. The news settled over me like a heavy blanket. Part of me had always wondered if there were others, if Daniel's behavior with me was unique or part of a larger pattern. Now I had my answer. That evening's support group meeting felt different. Sarah was there without her husband for the first time. She sat next to me, clutching a cup of tea with shaking hands. The irony of the beverage choice wasn't lost on either of us. "I left last night," she whispered. "After the meeting, I kept thinking about what you said, about small acts of courage. I packed a bag while he was sleeping and went to my sister's." Pride and concern warred in my chest. "Do you feel safe there?" She nodded. "He doesn't know where she lives. I'm meeting with a lawyer tomorrow." Her voice strengthened. "I want what you have. Independence, strength, the ability to drink tea without flinching." The last part was meant as a joke, but it held deeper truth. Healing came in strange measures, marked by unexpected milestones. The first night of peaceful sleep. The first genuine laugh. The first time you could tell your story without crying. Later that night, preparing for bed in my small but safe apartment, I received an email from the school district. They were offering accelerated recertification programs for teachers returning to the profession, with special consideration for survivors of domestic violence. The message mentioned afternoon and evening classes, compatible with my cafe schedule. Hope bloomed in my chest as I read the details. The path back to teaching was becoming clearer, more attainable. Not an immediate transition, but a goal to work toward while maintaining my independence at the Copper Cup. My phone lit up with a text from Maya. "Made something new for your walls. Can I bring it tomorrow?" The simple message represented everything I'd gained in leaving Daniel: genuine connections, unconditional support, the freedom to fill my space with art that spoke to my heart rather than matching an imposed aesthetic. As I prepared for sleep, my burns caught the lamplight, their healing marks a testament to survival. But they were no longer the first thing I saw in the mirror. Instead, I noticed the confidence in my posture, the clarity in my eyes, the small smile that came more easily each day. Tomorrow would bring new challenges: divorce negotiations, witness testimonies, the ongoing process of rebuilding a life. But tonight, in my small apartment surrounded by chosen treasures and honest relationships, I felt something Daniel had never been able to give me: genuine peace. The rain continued outside, a steady Portland rhythm against my windows. But instead of feeling trapped by the weather, I felt protected, cocooned in a space that represented not just survival, but revival. Each drop seemed to whisper possibilities of teaching again, of helping other survivors, of creating a life rich with meaning and authenticity. On my bedside table, a new journal waited for tomorrow's entries. Its pages would hold not just memories of trauma, but chronicles of triumph. Small victories and large revelations, steps forward and lessons learned. Each entry was a thread in the tapestry of my new life, weaving together strength and vulnerability, independence, and connection. The last thing I wrote before turning out the light was a quote from my favorite author. "Rock bottom became the solid foundation on which I rebuilt my life." The words felt truer now than ever before. The tea incident had been my rock bottom, but it had also been my wake-up call, my catalyst for change, my burning bridge to a past that no longer served me. In the quiet darkness, I made a silent promise to the woman who would walk into tomorrow's support group meeting, terrified and uncertain. I would show her that survival was possible, that freedom was worth the fight, that every small act of courage could lead to profound transformation. My story wasn't just mine anymore. It belonged to every person still searching for the strength to say, enough. Spring blossoms drifted past the windows of the copper cup as I arranged fresh pastries in the display case. 6 months had transformed the cafe into more than just my workplace. It was my anchor, my community, my proof that life could begin again at any moment. The morning sunlight caught the faint scars on my face, nearly invisible now unless you knew where to look. My reflection in the glass showed someone both familiar and new, a woman who had learned to stand tall, to meet her own gaze without flinching, to recognize her own worth. Hannah appeared beside me, reviewing the day's schedule. Ready for your big day? The afternoon is covered if you need more time to prepare. Today marked several milestones. The divorce would be finalized in the morning, followed by my first official teaching recertification class in the afternoon. The timing felt symbolic, ending one chapter of my life while beginning another. The cafe door chimed as Sarah walked in, her caste long gone, but her friendship a permanent fixture in my life. She'd moved into my spare room 3 months ago, and together we'd created a home filled with laughter and healing. Her own divorce was proceeding smoothly, her confidence growing stronger each day. "Special delivery," she announced, placing a small package on the counter. Inside was a delicate teacup painted with butterflies. "For your collection. 1 month. Sober from fear." The teacup would join others on our apartment shelves, each one representing a survivor who had found their way to freedom. Some brought by women from the support group, others discovered in thrift stores or gifted by well-wishers. Each cup told a story of transformation, of reclaiming something that had been used as a weapon. The morning rush kept me busy until it was time to leave for court. Olivia waited outside in her car, Maya's newest artwork, titled Freedom Wings, carefully wrapped in the back seat. The painting would hang in my newly expanded apartment, marking this day of transition. The courthouse felt different now. No fear lingered in its marble halls. No anxiety tightened my chest as we walked. To the familiar courtroom, Rachel Martinez met us with a warm hug, her briefcase lighter today. No need for evidence or testimony, just final paperwork to sign. Daniel wasn't present for the proceedings, his signature already notarized on the required documents. His absence felt right. This moment belonged to me alone. Judge Martinez, who had granted my restraining order months ago, presided over the divorce with kind efficiency. "Rebecca Anderson," she announced, using my reclaimed maiden name. "You are hereby legally divorced. All terms of the settlement are finalized and binding." The words settled over me like a gentle rain, washing away the last traces of my old life. The settlement had been fair, negotiated without compromise to my principles. No silence bought with money, no truth traded for peace. Outside the courthouse, spring sunshine warmed my face as I breathed in my first moments as a legally single woman. Olivia hugged me tightly, whispering congratulations. But there was no time to celebrate yet. My recertification class waited. The community college classroom buzzed with nervous energy as I found my seat. Other students filtered in, some fresh from teaching programs, others like me, returning to education after time away. The instructor, Dr. Williams, had worked with survivors before, understanding the unique challenges we faced in reclaiming professional identities. "Teaching is more than a profession," she began. "It's a calling, a way of empowering others to find their voice. Some of you are returning to this calling after detours and obstacles. Your experiences, even the painful ones, will make you better educators." Her words resonated deeply. I thought of all the lessons my journey could teach, about resilience, about self-worth, about the courage to begin again. My future students would benefit not just from my academic knowledge, but from my hard-won wisdom about survival and growth. Between classes, I checked my phone to find messages of support flooding in. Hannah sharing photos of a special celebration cake at the cafe. Grace confirming next week's speaking engagement at a domestic violence awareness event. Sarah announcing she'd been approved for her own apartment, ready for her next step toward independence. The day ended with a small gathering at the Copper Cup after closing. Friends who had become family gathered to celebrate not just my divorce or my return to teaching, but the entire journey of transformation. Each person present had played a role in my healing, from Officer Chen, who had responded to that first emergency call, to Maya, who had filled my walls with color and hope. Hannah clinked her glass for attention. A year ago, Rebecca walked into this cafe looking for a job. What she found was a community. What we found was inspiration. She turned to me with tears in her eyes. You've shown us all what courage looks like. And now I'm thrilled to officially announce your promotion to cafe manager. The news took me by surprise. We'd discussed the possibility, but I hadn't expected it so soon. The role would provide stability while I completed my recertification, allowing me to blend my newfound cafe expertise with my journey back to teaching. As the celebration continued, I slipped away to the quiet back office. Opening my journal, one of many now filled with reflections and dreams, I began to write about this day of endings and beginnings. The words flowed easily, no longer haunted by Daniel's criticism or Jenny's demands. A soft knock interrupted my writing. Sarah stood in the doorway, holding 2 cups of tea. "Thought you might be ready," she said quietly. Understanding the significance, I accepted the cup. The Earl Grey's aroma no longer triggered memories of pain and betrayal. Instead, it represented healing, the reclaiming of simple pleasures too long associated with trauma. Together, we sipped our tea and watched the sunset through the cafe windows. Sarah spoke first, her voice thoughtful. "You know what I realized today? When I first met you, I thought I wanted what you had, the strength to leave, the courage to start over. But now I understand that strength was in me all along. You just helped me find it." Her words touched something deep in my heart. "We all have that strength," I replied. "Sometimes we just need someone to remind us it's there." The evening wound down naturally, friends departing with hugs and promises to celebrate again soon. Maya left her latest artwork, a series of teacups transformed into butterflies, symbolizing the beauty that could emerge from broken things. In the quiet aftermath, I walked through the cafe that had become my sanctuary. Each table held memories of conversations with survivors. Each corner echoed with stories of healing and hope. The espresso machines gleamed in the dim light, no longer just tools for making coffee, but instruments of independence and growth. My phone lit up with a final message for the day, from the Domestic Violence Support Center, where I now volunteered. Another woman had found the courage to leave, inspired by the story of a tea incident that had burned away fear and revealed strength. At home, Sarah and I arranged Maya's new painting in our living room gallery. The butterflies seemed to dance in the evening light, their wings carrying messages of transformation. On our shelves, the collection of teacups caught the last rays of sunset, each one representing a survivor's journey from victim to victor. Opening my laptop, I began working on lesson plans for my future classroom. The teaching certificate would take time to complete, but the path was clear now. Each slide I created, each curriculum note I made, felt like steps toward a future I had chosen for myself. A new journal waited on my desk, its first page ready for tomorrow's reflections. But tonight, surrounded by evidence of how far I'd come, I simply sat in the peaceful quiet of my chosen life. No more walking on eggshells, no more dimming my light to soothe someone else's insecurities. No more sacrificing my dreams for false peace. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.